Thank you, Mr. Howarth, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate today. I'll start by just saying what I think will probably be obvious, that I have always voted to abolish the House of Lords, and given the opportunity again, I would vote to abolish the House of Lords again in the future. That's not because there is, as the Honourable Member for Edinburgh East has said, not good people in the House of Lords. There are. But I happen to take a view that there needs to be some elements of democratic input in order to make legislation on behalf of my constituents. I wake up every morning in this House knowing that I've had crosses put by my name that have sent me here. And those crosses can be removed at the next election and put by another candidate. And that keeps me on my toes, if I may say so, Mr. Howarth, and allows me to know that when I stand up and speak, what I say is being held to account by people at home. And when I stand up and speak, those people can support me or remove me in the future. Now, having said that I've abolished the House of Lords, and I would always vote to do that, self-evidently we need to replace the House of Lords with a mechanism, or we need to look at how we abolish the House of Lords. And I don't wish to focus in detail today, because of time, on the fullness of the report. There is very little I disagree with the Honourable Member for Edinburgh East in his comments. We can speed up the process, we can increase the number of people being removed, we can do all sorts of things. But what I want to focus on today is an issue the Minister knows I've got a bee in my bonnet about, and which I will continue to chew government legs on for the foreseeable future until it is achieved, which is the issue of the hereditary peers, which is referred to in this report by the noble lords themselves. And they say in the report, as members will know, there are 92 hereditary peers. The Labour government, of which I voted for in 1997, that bill removed hundreds of hereditary peers from the House of Lords, quite rightly. But as part of the deal to get that reform through, which needed the Lords' approval, it did keep 92 hereditary peers, with the intention of removing those hereditary peers at a date in the future. Now, here we are now, 18 years after that bill was passed, where hereditary peers still sit in the House of Lords, 92 of them in total. Now, the House of Lords report itself says, and I quote, "In the absence of legislation, the hereditary peers will make up a larger proportion of a smaller House, with a particular significant impact on the Conservative and crossbenchers. The House, and more pertinently, the Government, will need to consider whether such a situation is sustainable. Any change would require legislation which could only reach, realistically, the statute book if it had government support." So, irrespective of the wide-ranging changes that are being proposed, the House of Lords, as part of its wish to reduce its number, has said effectively that the hereditary peers are unsustainable and the government needs to look at a legislative solution to bring those matters forward. Now, it just so happens, Mr. Howarth, as I mentioned in an intervention to the member for Edinburgh East, that I have a legislative solution which is printed on the 7th of September 2017, which is due for a second reading on the 27th of April 2018, which abolishes hereditary peers with effect from 2020, to give time for the transition to take place. Now, I'd like to know from the Minister when he responds, given the House of Lords' proposals, whether he would support that bill. I recognise parliamentary time is tight, but it doesn't take a great deal of effort to support a bill such as that if the Minister has the political will to do so. He will also know that my noble friend Lord Grocott, in another place, in the House of Lords itself, has come top, number one, on the private members' bills. And Lord Grocott is, if I may say, good cop to my bad cop on hereditary peers. He wishes simply to end the elections to hereditary peers and let the hereditaries disappear slowly over time when election vacancies become available. I'd like to know from the Minister whether he would support Lord Grocott's private members' bill, because, Mr. Howarth, there is parliamentary time available in the House of Lords to take that bill through in this long session of Parliament. There is parliamentary time to end the election to hereditary peers. And if the Minister can't support my bill, or the principle of my bill, he could potentially support Lord Grocott's bill. And he'll have to, at some point, Mr. Howarth, vote against that bill in another place, because I'll tell you now, it's not a secret, but Lord Grocott will bring that bill forward, has had a second reading, will take it to committee, and wants to see it come to this place so that I, on behalf of Lord Grocott, can take that bill through this place in parliamentary time. So the Minister needs to focus, if nothing else today, on what he's going to do with hereditary peers. Now, why does this matter, Mr. Howarth? Why does it matter? I happen to take a view that the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchild of somebody who did something well 400, 500, 600 years ago should not be making legislation on behalf of my constituents today. Lord Mostyn, who lives in Mostyn Hall in my constituency, applied to be a hereditary peer recently again when the vacancy came up. He got his peerage originally, his grandparents and great-grandparents, because his great-great-great-great relative fought on the side of the king in the English Civil War. Now, I don't know about you, Mr. Howarth, but it doesn't seem to me to be the basis to make legislation in the 21st century which side you fought on in the English Civil War. I know the Scottish colleagues are here today. I'm sure they will appreciate the fact that Lord Fairfax of Cameron is currently in the House of Lords. His ancestor got his peerage because his ancestor was the first person to go to Edinburgh to meet the new James I of Scotland and James VI of England, and therefore, the other way around, sorry. I'm not very good at my royals, but you get the point is made, Mr. Howarth, but he got his peerage because he was the first person to travel from London to Edinburgh to meet the new king. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't seem to me to be the modern way of making democratic decisions. Lord Attlee sits in the House of Lords now. He has his peerage because Clement Attlee was given a hereditary peerage when he retired from the House of Commons. Lord Attlee is now a Conservative member. Now, I don't think that is a basis to have the architect of the NHS and the welfare state's grandchild making laws now and voting with the Conservative whip when his grandfather was a staunch Labour member and that peerage was given in that instance because of the fact that member was a staunch Labour member. The election system we have now, Mr. Howarth, for hereditary peers is absolutely nonsense on sticks. Let me just give you the one example. Lord Thurso, God bless his cotton socks, Lord Thurso was thrown out of the House of Lords by the Labour government's Hereditary Peers Act in 1999. He stood for the House of Commons and got elected for Caithness and Sutherland in the 2001 election as a Member of Parliament. He transferred his blue blood to his ordinary blood in 2001. He lost his seat in 2015 to a member of the SNP, thrown out by the electorate. By chance, a Liberal hereditary peer died, and there was a by-election in the House of Lords. 3 people put their names forward for that by-election, 3 Liberal Democrats. Lord Thurso got 100% of the vote and is now back in the House of Lords, having had a blood transfusion to blue blood again, to be a member of the House of Lords. Now, is that tenable, Minister? Is that tenable? That's the simple question that the Minister needs to ask. Is that tenable? Is it tenable for 3 people to vote 100% for somebody who's got a peerage because of what their relatives did in the ancient history, who's been thrown out of the House of Commons and is now back legislating in this chamber? I simply say, Mr. Howarth, that if this was Parliament was an African country, the Minister's foreign Commonwealth colleagues would be calling for sanctions because the families would have ruled this Parliament for generations and would have no democracy. If this were China and Chairman Mao's grandson, well, if this were China, if this were China and Chairman Mao's grandson had a seat in the Chinese Parliament simply because he was Chairman Mao's grandson, I bet the Minister would be calling for sanctions against China. I'll give way.
Having lived and worked in China, that is not the case. But just on your point about supremacy and democracy, do you not accept, though, that under the 1911 Act, the people of the United Kingdom are still sovereign through the Parliament Act and that the Commons can still overrule the Lords? So though I agree there should be reform in the Lords, let's not take the argument to the extreme. Democracy still rules in this country, and that lies with the Commons.
Well, I am, yes, I am, don't worry, I am. I'm Mr. Howarth, trust me, I am. The House of Commons does reign supreme, but I take the view, Mr. Howarth, that this is about a different system. And whatever else we do with the House of Lords, the Minister, who is a historian, needs to know he's on the wrong side of history, and he needs to know that he has to bring forward a solution, or he'll be judged by history for failing to do so. And I hope whatever else he does, he will remove hereditary peers, he will accept either Lord Grocot's bill or mine, or indeed bring forward his own and make history.